It is something that many of us take for granted, a roof over our heads. But that's definitely not the case for all. In Ontario, we have about 185,000 households on the largest wait list for socially assisted housing in the country. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has said that his government will move to enshrine adequate housing as a human right. Leilani Farha is the UN Special Rapporteur on the right to adequate housing and Executive Director of the national nonprofit Canada Without Poverty. And she joins us now to make the case for housing as a human right. So nice to meet you.
Nice to be here.
Thank you for coming in tonight. You want to declare 2018 the year of the right to housing. How come?
I do. Really because, and this is globally, not just in Canada, I think housing is the issue. I think I travel around the world in my role as rapporteur, and every city I go to and every rural area I go to, housing is the key issue. And yet, for people, for everyday people, and yet I'm not seeing it on political and legal agendas in the way that I think it needs to. People talk about the environment. There's no doubt climate change and the environment is a huge issue, hugely important. I would put housing right up there.
Right up there or ahead of it?
Maybe ahead of it.
Ahead of the environment, eh? Ahead of climate change. Make that case.
I'm not going to take on the climate change people with due respect. But I will say that if you look at people's lives, what is the most central thing in every person's life, your life, my life, every person's life, a homeless person's life, someone living in inadequate housing. Housing is central to everything. It's central to health, education, to being alive, to access to water and sanitation. I mean, housing is just central.
It's where it all starts.
I think so.
Housing is not necessarily viewed, though, by most people, I think it's fair to say, as a basic human right. How do you think it is viewed now?
Absolutely right that it's not viewed by many as a human right. What I find really interesting, Steve, is that when I talk to people, especially people struggling with housing, they kind of know it is a human right. They often will say to me, surely I'm not meant to live this life. Surely I'm entitled to a life of dignity. And dignity is the core of human rights. That's what we're on about, right? That's why housing is a human right, because it goes to the core of a life of dignity. So people know it's a human right on that kind of visceral level. I find governments, all levels of government, developers, real estate agents, investors, private equity firms, they don't know that it's a human right.
Well, that's the key, right? Because for so many people, including homeowners, right, they see it as potential. If they don't have a pension, that is their pension. It is an investment for them. It is, part of their capital infrastructure. They don't necessarily see it as a basic human right. I guess the follow-up is, in New York, in Hong Kong, in London, in Toronto, in cities where housing is affordable housing is a huge issue. Is it just that in those kind of bigger cities, or does it go beyond that?
Oh, it definitely goes beyond that. There's no doubt that in those hubs that you mentioned, housing is really, in new and unprecedented ways, looked at as a commodity. There's no doubt about that. And you're seeing money flowing from, island to island, investor money being plunked into housing as a commodity. You're seeing big private equity firms, pension funds, putting money into housing as a commodity to grow wealth. That's for sure.
But housing is a commodity that does grow wealth. It is at least that, right?
It hasn't always been regarded that way, though.
Okay.
So and I'm not here to say never look at housing as a way to have some economic security. I'm not saying that. But what we've seen recently is different. The huge, unprecedented amounts of capital being sunk into housing as the safest investment. That is new. Housing has always, I think, been understood as a place of security, a place for security, but not necessarily a place to grow wealth. So if let's take Canada, for example. There was huge investment in housing in the 60s and 70s. And I think governments felt like housing was really core to the security of a family or an individual. And there was a way in which we made sure that there was all sorts of different types of housing. So social housing as housing of last resort. Home ownership was made possible for a variety of people who could afford home ownership. Rental accommodation was being built so that those who didn't need social housing but couldn't afford a home could go into the rental market. That was viewed akin to housing as a human right because it was like, okay, we need to provide and ensure that people have security, and housing is key to that. I think there's been a huge shift between that vision of housing as security and now housing as the safe place to invest money by the uber wealthy and by these pension funds, et cetera. Is it a global phenomenon and not just these hub cities, as we might call them? Or absolutely. I mean, if you take, let's take Lagos, Nigeria, just as a random example. I mean, the pressures on land and real estate there are real and true. And, you know, I hear of communities, thousands of people, like 30,000 people being evicted from a waterfront community for what? The development of luxury accommodation and a shopping mall. And that's not unique to Nigeria. I'm seeing this happen in developing countries around the world.
Where does Airbnb fit in on that list of yours?
Yeah. Well, Airbnb is part of this phenomenon that I call the financialization of housing. And regulated Airbnb in cities, I don't take issue with. What I take issue with is, for example, what I've seen in Barcelona, or I saw it in Portugal as well, in Porto, Portugal, and it's elsewhere, where you have these multinationals, investors going in, buying an entire building and not creating any affordable housing or any housing for the local market, but instead creating short-term rentals. Why? Because you maximize profits that way. Sure. That's clear, right? And so that doesn't contribute to the housing stock that's so desperately needed in so many cities. A study came out of New York recently showing that between 7,000 and 13,500 units had gone to Airbnb when those very units would otherwise have been rental accommodation for the local residents and not for tourists. That's a huge 13,500 units. That's a lot in a city that has over 100,000 people who are homeless.
We are about 10 years removed from the beginning of the Great Recession, the financial collapse, the foreclosures. How did all of that fit into the United States' view of housing as a commodity?
There was a very tight connection. This is a sad story, in my opinion, and a scary story, and a yet to be fully told story. So after the global financial crisis, and there were all those homes that were foreclosed, and not just in the US, we can look at Spain as well, you can look at Ireland as well. These are all good examples. A big private equity firm called Blackstone that has over $100 billion in real estate assets in its portfolio. So, you know, they're big, massive. Saw this as a huge economic opportunity for them and their investors. And so they bought up a huge number of these foreclosed homes. And they have a kind of motto, which is buy it, fix it, and then either sell it or increase the rents on that property. And they did that. They are now, they have at least 80,000 single-family homes in the US. So they are the largest landlord in the US. And what they did is they preyed on the economic vulnerability of families, and they flipped these units and have increased rents and are now renting them out. Now you could say, well, wait a second, they created rental accommodation. And I agree with that. They did create rental accommodation, but what I'm hearing is that in order to satisfy their investor clients, they have to keep raising the rents because the property is leveraged, right? And they need to give a good return to their investors. So they are increasing rents. And that's a direct relationship between those foreclosures and the way in which that's a commodification of housing. I've heard stories that now tenants are calling 1-800 numbers in the US. That's their landlord, a 1-800 number. So it's not just that you have all this uber amount of money being put into housing as a commodity. It's changing the nature of housing, If you know that your landlord is a private equity corp, surely that feels different than if you know your landlord's like a local business, right?
But you say that housing is a basic human right, and it is one thing to state that as a principle. What does that actually mean when the rubber hits the road?
Yeah, people are always surprised. I think there's a sense that human rights are kind of aspirational, and when you talk about the right to housing, it's like airy-fairy or something. It's actually really concrete, and it means very particular things. So, it means, first of all, developing a strategy to address housing inequality, we might call it, or homelessness and inadequate housing. So one, developing a strategy, and that strategy itself should be based in human rights. That means putting people at the center. And that it entirely changes the way in which we do policy, for example.
People as opposed to return on investment for developers.
Exactly. Okay. And people who are most in need, and recognizing that they actually should have a say in their future. It's a different way. You're saying, well, this person is a rights holder. In other words, we're dealing with something that is a human right, and they are the humans. Let's go to the human side.
I get that, yeah. but it's actually the people who build homes and develop, and it is the developers who are going to make this happen for you.
That's right.
So you got to get them to have some skin in the game too.
That's right. And I've been trying to suggest, and I don't know how well this is going to go over with anyone, but I've been trying to suggest that we need to start getting developers, real estate agents, and investors to understand that when they go into the business of housing, it's different than going into the business of buying gold. That housing, unlike gold, is a human right. And so when you engage in that business, you've engaged in a human right. That also has implications for governments. And this is the thing, the game changer, in my opinion, about a human rights approach. Human rights is very clear who is responsible to whom. Unlike in many other frameworks, even if you look at the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals, human rights, states, that's governments, have signed and ratified things. They have committed to certain things. So who is responsible to whom? States or governments are responsible to people. And I love that about human rights because it's very clean. But what does that mean in terms of real estate developers and private equity firms, et cetera? It means there's an onus on the state to regulate those areas of business, to regulate them so that they comply with the state's human rights obligations.
Are we doing that?
No. We mean in Canada?
Yeah.
No. But is anyone doing it? Not sure. I don't have good examples from around the world of where this is happening in a really meaningful way. No. And this is this is where I'm trying to push things, because I think if the Sustainable Development Goals are going to be realized, especially Goal 11, which includes targets around housing, I think that states are going to have to start regulating that sector, and like now.
Well, number 11 is about sustainably developable, I'm not saying that well, but it's about cities, making cities sustainable.
That's right.
To what extent is housing woven into all of that?
Yeah, so the first target under that goal is to ensure access to adequate and affordable and secure housing for all by 2030.
So it's central.
Absolutely.
To make a number
central.
11 happen, it's central that we get housing
Absolutely.
right.
Absolutely. I think that a huge problem that most cities are confronting is a housing problem. I think it's if you really when you sort of take a look at, of course there are other infrastructure problems in cities, and there's big resource issues for cities, really big. But I think for the functioning of cities, I was in Northern California in January, and I was going into, cafes and whatever, and I was asking, every time I would go into a cafe, I'd say to the young barista, so where do you live? Every single person I spoke with, without exception, lived at least 2 hours away or an hour and a half away commute. That's a
Not
problem
good.
for cities. I've seen signs advertising, for baristas, and they can't, these, Starbucks, et cetera, can't get people to work there in the city. Why? Because they don't make enough money to live in the city. And that's at the lowest rung. I mean, it's even happening. Nurses, firefighters, garbage collectors, I don't know. All the people who make cities function can't actually afford to live in cities. Don't you think that's a problem? Like that's not sustainable, right?
Leilani, I got to tell you, That's the fastest 15 minutes in television history. We got a lot packed in there, and that just flew by. But I want to thank you very much for coming in tonight and sharing your views on this.
Thanks so much, Steve.
That's Leilani Farha, who is the UN's special rapporteur, or rapporteur, on the right to housing. Thank you so much.
Thanks.
The Agenda with Steve Bacon is brought to you by the Chartered Professional Accountants of Ontario, helping businesses stay on the right side of change with strategic thinking, insightful decisions, and business leadership. Are you on the right side of change? Ask an Ontario CPA.